welcome to another Smaulgld live stream. It is Tuesday, the 26th of November, 2019. Tonight's topic, China increases reliance on U.S. dollar. One of the things that pumpers like to do is to set you up with an assumption or what they believe is a fact or what they want you to believe is a fact. So, for example, with silver, solar demand is increasing at an exponential rate. That's a fact. And silver is used in solar panels. And that is all you need to know. And once you have that concept in mind, they don't have to provide you with the statistics on the amount of silver that's being used for solar. You just have it tucked away in the back of your head that silver is used in solar panels. And solar panels are increasing at an exponential rate. And that is all I need to know. But what they don't tell you is that the amount of silver being used in solar panels is decreasing rapidly as well, and therefore the amount of silver that'll be required for solar panels is really not an exponential increase. What does this have to do with China? Well, the same thing with China. What they like to say is that China is challenging the United States. China's economy is now the second largest in the world. China's economy is growing. China has a faster GDP than the United States. And from that, China is also buying gold. And that is all you need to know, because the logic goes that China is going to crush the dollar, they're buying gold, and the dollar is toast, and everything is going to be denominated in yuan or gold. Gold-backed yuan was the perfect pump for that. But again, what they fail to tell you is how China became as large as it became, which is largely through trade with the United States. Now, the other thing that they try to pump with China is that China's number one goal, well, it's actually twofold, is to make the yuan an international reserve currency, if not the reserve currency, and two, to buy gold. Now, nothing could be further from the truth. China does have goals of internationalizing the yuan. But if you read internal documents, it's along the lines of a 30-year plan. It's not something that they're looking to do. It's not even something that they would necessarily reap benefits from. China has indicated in prioritization things that they are far more concerned about than, quote, crushing the dollar. Currently, they have issues in Hong Kong. So they need to solve that. Secondly, they have issues with a trade agreement with the United States. They have to solve that. Now, would they rather solve Hong Kong or trade issues with the U.S., or would they rather just go ahead and crush the dollar and make the yuan a reserve currency? The answer is simple. They're trying to sort out Hong Kong and the United States. China also has issues with establishing itself in the South China Sea. It has issues with getting enough resources for its population. It has issues with just staying in power. It has issues that it is aware of with its debt issuance and whether they've reached a Minsky moment and whether they can continue to rely on real estate and building to fuel their economy when a lot of their projects are make-work projects. They're well aware of that. The central planning is working on that. They're talking about trying to deleverage. They haven't been able to do so. They're also concerned about keeping the tens, if not hundreds of millions of Chinese who have moved in from rural China into cities and keeping them employed. So the idea that a pumper will tell you that China's number one goal is to crush the dollar and buy gold, well, that's just designed, again, to make you buy gold, just as touting solar is designed to buy, the increase in solar power is designed to get you to buy silver. China actually not only is not crushing the dollar, China's goals to internationalize the yuan are faltering. But again, it's not like China's failing because it's failing to internationalize the yuan. It's not a priority of theirs right now. It's not an immediate priority, and there's benefits and drawbacks to having a reserve currency, as the United States could possibly tell you. The reason I want to talk about this was back in September of 2000. I've been on this issue for the longest time, for years now, about what China is up to and the reality of what China is doing versus what the pumpers are trying to explain China is doing. China is heavily reliant on the US dollar. And the reason I say that, and the pumpers know this, but they downplay it. They try to say all the time, China is dumping treasuries and it's end of dollar hegemony, multipolar world, game over, game changer, you know, the whole line of nonsense that they spew constantly. But here's the issue with China. China not only has a lot of dollar U.S. treasuries as a result of trade with the United States. I mean, that is the cut against the United States is China sends goods to the United States, and the United States just sends them their paper, which the Chinese then convert into U.S. treasuries. And now they're saying, well, they're just going to buy gold instead. Okay, let's step back. It's not that China, not just that China does its trade and receives dollars for its goods, but that China also operates its economy on dollars. The Chinese central bank, the Chinese state-owned banks, the Chinese state-owned enterprises, which borrow from the state-owned banks, do mostly so in dollars. They borrow dollars at the local level, at the Chinese state level, and they have to repay those debts in dollars. That means that China needs an increasing amount of dollars to pay off the debt. Now, back in September of 2017, I noted that China was going to issue a $2 billion U.S. denominated bond. And it was the first one that they had done since 2004. Now, that's not a lot of money. And you say, well, that's no big deal, that China itself. But that's China at the national level. Now, why was China back in 2017 issuing a dollar-denominated sovereign bond? Well, the answer is they were trying to get a lower rate, benchmark rate, for what their state-owned enterprises, which also borrow in dollars, so that they would have lower borrowing costs. And so China did indeed issue a $2 billion bond in 2017. They also issued a sovereign bond, I believe, last year as well. Now there's talk that China is going to issue not a $2 billion bond, but a $6 billion bond. Now, why are they doing it? Same reason. But let's take a look at what I was talking about in the bond issuance. It's not just the $6 billion U.S. denominated bond that the Chinese government's going to issue. It's the $200 billion plus that they borrow at the lower state level. Here's a chart. And it's interesting. Here's this guy, Holger Zixrapitz, whatever his name is. He calls this a sign of dollar demise. I'm sorry, it's the exact opposite. It says China is planning a record sale of sovereign bonds in dollars with a potential $6 billion offering. This is the third straight year for China to sell sovereign dollar debt. That's just the Chinese government. Chinese 2019 offshore bond issuance are setting at a record pace according to Bloomberg. And this chart shows this year they'll do over $200 billion. Now look at the increase in that dollar-denominated borrowing since 2009 from virtually zero to $200 billion. That means in the last 10 years, China has increased its U.S. reliance on the dollar by $200 billion. It needs to come up with $200 billion to pay off these loans. Now, if the yuan was actually a viable currency, they would just borrow in yuan and then print up the yuan and pay off the difference. They wouldn't have a problem. The problem with the Chinese yuan is literally no one wants it, despite all this nonsense that it's going to be gold backed and so on. Here's a chart I did just a couple of years ago, but it's pretty much the same today. And China recognizes this and they don't care. This is not their number one issue. The percentage of international reserves held by central banks in Chinese yuan is infinitesimal. It's less than 5, less than 4, and probably even less than 3%. The big reserve currencies held by central banks are dollars and euros, then yen, then pounds, and then Australian dollars, and then Canadian dollars, and then Swiss francs, and then Chinese RMB. And obviously gold is ahead of all of those other than euros and dollars. So the Chinese yuan is not a threat to the dollar. There's a reason it's not a threat to the dollar, because China knows that it has issues with debt. It knows it can't be transparent. In order to become a reserve currency, there has to be some trust internationally that the numbers that they report are accurate. Now, there's a lot of people in the gold community, you can trust the U.S. numbers. Okay, but internationally, they are relatively trusted, far more than China's, far, far more. Also, you have to have a currency which isn't subject to capital controls, which China's is. It has to be also considered one where they're not on a debt binge that they're unable to pay back, which China is on a debt binge far greater than any Western nation and even the United States. And you also have to not just have confidence in the reporting, but that the country isn't going to just say, you know what, we need to devalue the yuan because of internal issues, so there you go. You can't have a reserve currency that's subject to those devaluations. Now, people can say, what about the dollar? What about the dollar? Yes, the biggest threat to, quote, dollar hegemony was the two biggest threats since 1944. One in 1971 when Nixon just said, you know what, no more gold for central banks that want to bring their dollars here and get gold. We're not going to do that anymore. We're not going to honor the agreement. Right? The second biggest threat was in 2009 when the United States had the financial crisis and they said, we're just going to buy our own debt, which basically meant that any other country or any other entity that had paid real value for U.S. treasuries meant that it didn't matter. The Fed was going to buy them out of thin air with money they printed out of thin air. Now, the reason that's less of a threat today is because not only has the United States stopped doing that, or only recently restarted doing it, every country does it. So it's no longer some type of emergency outrage that the United States is buying its own debt or was buying its own debt. Every country does it. Well, two wrongs don't make a right. I understand that. But the point is that the United States right now is no longer the only country that's printing money. Printi the money is what Mario Draghi used to say at the ECB. They printed even more money than the United States. They print, and they're still on it. They're at well over $5 trillion in QE. And also, the negative interest rates, the low interest rates are much lower than the United States. So China really is not a threat to the dollar. Now, the reason people or pumpers, gold pumpers, like to push the whole end of dollar hegemony is because they think that that's somehow good for gold. Dollar collapse, good for gold. China ascendancy, good for gold. China buys gold. It's a very basic narrative, and therefore gold is going to go higher. So most recently, they're saying that China plans now a record sale of dollar bonds with a new $6 billion offering. And this is the whole multipolar world, China to crush the dollar, end of dollar hegemony. And it's not just gold pumpers that push this nonsense. China is a great place to pump. There was a gold pump, a Bitcoin pumper who was trying to say China has more crypto freedoms than the United States, which makes absolutely no sense. It's not true. China doesn't allow Bitcoin exchange trading. China is thinking about banning Bitcoin mining. And yet, it persists. It persists that somehow, because China made an announcement, there was an announcement the other day that China was going to do some blockchain, was pushing blockchain. Yeah, here it is. Pompliano. China is literally running front page stories about Bitcoin in their largest newspapers. Well, first of all, that was false. They mentioned the Bitcoin. They're running a front page story about how China was going into blockchain, not Bitcoin. And in fact, I said at the time, they're talking blockchain, not Bitcoin, was a very typical refrain a few years back about from Bitcoin bashers. But China's actually saying that. They're saying blockchain, not Bitcoin. But once you get into the pump, you just say, anything that's related to Bitcoin, anything that's related to China, it's all good. It's all good for Bitcoin. Same with gold pumpers. China does something, well, that just means it's the end of the dollar, and the end of the dollar means it's good for gold. And if China is considered the antithesis of the dollar, and because if the dollar goes down, that's good for gold, then we're all for China. And now the Bitcoin pumpers are trying to get you on that same concept that somehow China is the place where cryptocurrency rules, and that's good for Bitcoin. And the dollar sucks too, and so therefore you got to have Bitcoin, or therefore you got to have gold. And then it's funny, you have the same people, the same type of pumpers that pump China on the gold side. There's Bitcoin pumpers that pump the China angle on the Bitcoin side, and then the Bitcoin and gold people argue with each other over which asset is better, with the gold people saying Bitcoin is worthless, the Bitcoin people saying that gold is antiquated, but they both rely on a China. I got cut off again by YouTube, but that's typical. Once BitChute is up and running, I'm just going to abandon this entire platform. I know there's a lot of people who like the YouTube platform. It's just too much of a nuisance. Anyway, what I was saying is that both the gold and Bitcoin pumpers love the China angle, and then the Bitcoin pumpers and the gold pumpers both go against each other. The Bitcoin pumpers saying that China's got crypto and they got it going on, and that you got to buy Bitcoin. And then the gold pumpers saying China's buying gold and China's the antithesis to the dollar, and therefore you got to buy gold. And then the gold people argue with the Bitcoin people, but they both use the China angle as their reason for their pump. Now, first of all, you don't need China for gold or Bitcoin to rise. I don't know why they use this, but that's just what they like to point out. The other thing is the lunacy of the argument, and some people are finally catching on that somehow gold is what's the word? That gold is not that gold. That China is wonderful and is going to have the reserve currency because they have gold, but you see, they hide the amount of gold because it's some type of Sun Tzu deception. And well, that doesn't make a stitch of sense, because if you're trying to become the world reserve currency, as Daniel Lacal says here, if a country wants to become a world reserve currency, an alternative to the dollar, it would underreport its gold reserves as a way to give it confidence and increase use. That doesn't make, he's right, that doesn't make any sense. If you're trying to pump the yuan, you don't hide the amount of gold you have. But then the gold pumpers call it a Sun Tzu deception. But not only that, what Daniel doesn't matter, and it's only a tweet, you go one step further. Not only would you'd be dumb to underreport your gold reserves, because you'd want to report more gold reserves if you're trying to boost your currency, but by actually making it known that you're being deceptive, goes against the concept of having a transparent currency. So on the one hand, they're saying China is great because it's got all this gold, but they're even greater because they hide it. It's some type of Sun Tzu deception. None of it makes any sense. It only makes sense if you're willing to believe a stupid narrative because you want your gold to go up. And the real issue with all this is, well, gold and Bitcoin, there are cases. You don't need the dollar to collapse. You don't need China to crush the dollar for Bitcoin or gold to go higher. But the pumpers seem to rely on it. There's some very high-profile gold pumpers and Bitcoin pumpers that love to pump China. And also what's intriguing about that is many of these people are so-called freedom, libertarian, free market people, and they're cheering on China, whose record on freedom, they have more crypto freedoms. I don't understand that one. But somehow they have a more free economic system than the United States. That's not true. It's pointless to even discuss it. It's not even remotely true. But once you want to believe that China is your gold buddy or China is your Bitcoin buddy, then you start cheering on China because they're united with you, and they're not. They're with you to boost the price of gold or Bitcoin because the dollar's going to go down. And gold and Bitcoin have investment cases that can cause them to rise without a dollar collapse or some type of global reset or end of central banking. But you never hear the end of it from the pumpers. And I guess if you just put out rational cases for gold or silver or Bitcoin, it's not going to grab the attention. So you got a solar set to skyrocket silver and China to do this. That's what they got to put up. Anyway, I want to thank everyone for joining me tonight. There is a happy Smaulgld Mugs stacker there in Thailand. That's one of the Crypto Shrugged officers. They're working on a new book there in Thailand, and he's there with his Smaulgld mug. Thanks for sending that along. So let's see what you guys are saying in the comment section. I hope that I got cut off again. I don't apologize for YouTube. I can't. I have no control over YouTube, so I'm not going to apologize for them. But let's just see what you guys are saying in the comment section here. If I can even get there. Here we go. Well, that's the wrong one. All right, what do you guys say here? Nope, that's not the one. Is that the one? Nope. All right, let's see if we can get the comments. Nope, still on. All right. Doesn't look like I have any. I got Joshua Roberts, game over. Give me a place to stand and I shall move the world. LC, you were right and stuck to your guns. Nicely done, says Joshua Roberts. Well, thank you, Joshua, for joining me. Fiona says, I didn't have a notification. Of course not. There are people that are insisting that I stay on this platform because it's convenient. I don't know how it's convenient when they don't notify you, when I get cut off half the time. And forget the censorship. It's the same with China. People who support China are the same people that support YouTube when they're the type that are claiming to be, you would think, liberty-minded, for free speech, but yet, I don't know. They tend to like this platform, and some of them like China because they think it somehow helps them. It doesn't. Anyway, for those of you just joining, I've been on for about 25 minutes. We talked about China and the dollar, and I was cut off once, so if you go back, you can check it out. Sorry for those who were joining late because you just happened to tune in and see it, even though you didn't get the notification. By the way, I've been stuck at 3,800, not that I care, 3,980 subscribers. Now, there's no way that I don't see de-dollarization happening. That's just a pumper line. If you go back, Sean, and listen to the rest of the video we just did, that's just stuff that people talk about. The facts are going the other way. There is no de-dollarization. That's just countries that don't like the state of play complaining, and then gold pumpers picking up on that, or anti-Trumpers picking up on that and saying the world is against the dollar. The world's always against the superpower. That doesn't mean they can do anything about it. The BRICS have had it. Yeah, okay, South Africa is one of the BRICS. They've really had it, and they're going to put their foot down. What are they going to do? Russia and China are not necessarily allies. India is included in that. India is much pallier with the United States than they are with China. Brazil is part of the BRICS. Jair Bolsonaro, tropical Trump, he's not aligned with the BRICS to crush the dollar. This whole thing is a bunch of nonsense. Anyway. But it's considered a given amongst gold pumpers. Now the Bitcoin pumpers are in on it. China is all about blockchain, and they're pushing Bitcoin. They're not. They're banning Bitcoin exchanges. They're trying to get rid of Bitcoin mining. It's funny that most of this stuff is the exact opposite. Fiat currency will rule for the foreseeable future then? Probably. I mean, how many people actually use Bitcoin, which is the biggest fiat killer for transactions? How many people actually use it? How many transactions are there? Gold, no one's going to use gold. And that's not because gold is bad. It's because gold is good. No one wants to spend their gold. So what do you want to spend? Dollars. You'd rather spend bolivars if you were stuck with them. But dollars are the best thing to spend. You work for dollars. You pay your taxes in dollars. You pay your mortgage in dollars. You pay your debts in dollars. You give your allowance to your kids in dollars. Dollars are the best thing. You don't have to like it as a store of value, but dollars work. Why? Everyone accepts dollars. Go into a store and try to spend a Bitcoin, try to spend a silver coin, try to spend a gold coin. No one's going to take it. You got dollars, you can go to Argentina and they'll take them. You know, Sean, all this collapse, trauma, reset, it's all pumper talk. If you believe that there's a remote possibility or a distinct possibility that there's going to be some type of collapse, well, then you buy insurance. Put 5-10% of your, it's not investment advice. You buy a little gold or silver and then you're done with it. The real insurance you need is, what if there isn't a collapse? Then what are you going to do? Sit around staring at monster boxes of silver? Hoarding Bitcoin in case that becomes the currency that people need to use? It might not even happen. You don't even know that if there was a collapse, because in the last collapse, which didn't last so long, all they did was reflate the thing with fiat money. People didn't start spending silver coins, and there wasn't Bitcoin back then anyway in 2008 and 2009. So Sean, it's got nothing to do with no hope. Why are you hoping for a collapse? Only because you happen to hold gold or silver and you want it to skyrocket. And because the pumpers have convinced you that that's your way out. That's what's got to happen. And unfortunately, that's how they've sold gold and silver. They've sold you gold and silver. Now they're trying to sell you Bitcoin on the fact that China's your gold buddy, China's your Bitcoin buddy, and it's going to crush the dollar. And therefore, having your alternative currencies like Bitcoin and Litecoin and gold and silver somehow are going to make you rich. So now you start hoping for a collapse of Western civilization, the ascendancy of China. Sean, what about food shortages, crops? Yeah. What about it? There's always something that can go wrong. And if you're hoping for that, good luck. Go out and get a bunker and stack it with silver and gold and get a shotgun, as Joe Biden would say, and sit in front of it and hope it happens. You don't realize if any of this stuff happens, no matter how much gold or silver you have, you're not going to make it. Why? No one else is making it, so they're not going to produce goods and services for you to buy, so you can't be rich unless someone else is making stuff for you to be rich. It's the dumbest thing ever to hope for a collapse and think because you have gold and silver you're now rich and you can buy assets. There won't be assets to be bought because they won't be being made. I don't know. It really is ridiculous to me. And this idea that you're trapped in the dollar. How are you trapped? How are you trapped? You can make more dollars by investing money. You can invest money, and it could be in gold and silver. You can invest money in real estate. You can invest money in stocks. If you have more dollars, you are richer. Yes, if you have $100 today, in 10 years, $100 will be worth less. But if you invest properly and you work hard, you actually can have $300, which may only be worth $200 in today's dollars, but you're still up net $100. The idea that the only answer to anything is gold, silver, and Bitcoin is just a pumper narrative. And sadly, too many people have fallen into this. All right. Anyway, guys, thanks for listening. Sorry for the cutoff, but please go back and listen to the earlier part because I think I explained this nonsense that China is not crushing the dollar. China is reliant on dollars, and I don't think China really cares that much about it. China is not gold obsessed the way most people say they are. They've got other things to consider. Buying gold and crushing the dollar are not on the top of the list, or creating a Bitcoin ecosystem. This is just pumper talk, and it's just like real estate agents. They look at the world from the real estate angle. Just like there's always a good time to buy and sell a home. Well, that can't be true. If now is a good time to buy a home, and then it's not a good time to sell a home. If it's a good time to sell a home, it's not a good time to buy a home. But real estate agents always say now is a good time to buy or sell a home. Why? Because they want their commission. Well, now is a good time to buy gold or silver or Bitcoin. Why? Because you're selling gold, silver, or Bitcoin. Why? Because the collapse is coming. Because China's your gold buddy. Because China's doing this and China's doing that. And solar panels are exploding exponentially and yoga pants and nonsense. Good night.